So for that reason, I found myself getting into maybe drugs and alcohol, punching people, getting into fights unnecessarily because I had to make my position and get these feelings out of my way, out of my gut. And so I find my outlets. This is a lot to do with your personality type. So some people either acted in by eating. Some people just use drugs and alcohol. Some people get into fights. Some people join a gang, which is perfect place to go do harm. So by causing other people a grief and pain is justified, and you feel that they deserved it. They acted accordingly, and the thing that happens with these personality that as they get older, the feeling of anger becomes something that they cannot identify with. It's that they just basically, by acting out, they justify their anger that other people really simply deserved it, and they ask for it. And if you confront them with their rage, that anger that they showed, they oftentimes will deny it, and they said, "It wasn't me, it was you." We call this splitting off. And it's very typical with ragers, and after they cause tremendous devastation. In fact, one time, a family recorded their child, 16-year-old kid. He took the golf club and destroyed the house, raging, and they recorded him. And in this session, they played the tape. He had no idea. You know what his response was?
I didn't do that.
That's not me.
Right.
That's not me at all. That's somebody else. You guys have set me up. And the splitting up is very typical of ragers, and people are very, very angry and struggling with this dilemma. And oftentimes they get to a point where they're justified, and they will start acting on other people and not realizing they're basically perpetuating their past.
Yeah, justified in quotes. Obviously their behavior is not justified or justifiable, but to them it is.
Yes.
And so you're using a highly technical term here, splitting off, and let me clue my listeners in on what that is without getting too theoretical here. When you split off a part of you that you deny, that's too heinous, too painful to acknowledge, it's as if it's not even part of you, like the young man who couldn't see that he is indeed the guy who took a golf club to a house. So it's that thoroughly out of sight and out of mind, and which is why, from a therapeutic perspective, when you're working with someone and you finally cleared the way to reconnect a part of the person that has been split off, it often is traumatic and loud, and sometimes even there are threats of violence involved. It's that difficult to let that disowned information in. Folks, this is Dr. Beth Erickson. I'm talking today with Dr. Simon Casey about road rage and rage-aholics. And I'd love to invite you to stay tuned. Be sure you stay tuned for the second half of this show today. I'll be talking with John Nowicki about the importance of family dinners and how that really does bind a family together in a constructive way. So perhaps America's most famous rageaholic is O.J. Simpson.
Oh, my God, you took the words out of my mouth.
So do you think he killed Nicole and Ron Goldman in a fit of jealousy and rage?
Dr. Beth, it's funny you mentioned that. I got involved in that case in a very backward fashion. As I was gathering information, I was dealing with this anyway. And as you know, I live in the same community as Nicole Brown Simpson lived. And when this happened, actually I was involved with Brown family for their foundation, and we were going around the country and actually speaking on domestic violence. And if I don't know how much you heard about the tapes, and if you really look at this man, and he will be the poster child of rage-aholic.
Yeah.
And what he did. And it was very typical for him to just walk around and saying that I didn't do it. It wasn't me.
Because he was that thoroughly, he had that thoroughly split it off. So it wasn't even in his consciousness, apparently.
Of course not.
Uh-huh.
Of course not. He didn't do it as far as he's concerned. He just is a typical rage-aholic that he will act out and create something like this and yet take no ownership whatsoever.
You know, I get busy wondering how many NFL football players are rage-aholics. And, of course, you and I can only speculate about that. But, you know, the gratuitous violence, like Brett Favre has a broken foot and a broken ankle now because after he had thrown a pass, a defensive player from the other side tackled him at the ankle, which was already weakened from another tackle and surgery. And I wonder if that kind of gratuitous violence is sort of inherent in the game, at least among defensive players.
It is inherent, and also, you know, it's not a coincidence, and I don't believe in coincidence much anything anyway, that your personality dictates what kind of work you're going to have and what kind of profession you're going to have and what kind of a life you're going to pick. So for you to for someone to find themselves in as a professional ice hockey and him fighting, it's not a coincidence because it's a tremendous outlet and it's professionally accepted.
Yes.
And
you get rewarded for it.
Sure you do. And of course they have horrible family lives, but nobody really sees that and understands that. I actually recently, for the past couple of years, I have been treating cage fighters. And as you know, they're becoming more and more up and coming. And well, they took it to the next level now. And I really treated some of them that they shouldn't be out there. They shouldn't be in public. And they're basically criminals, but they are rewarded with money. And they're typical rage-aholics.
Yes, and in fact, I treated one, probably 3 years ago now, and I totally agree with what you're saying. And there's a kind of lawlessness to these people who, and it's usually young men, who get kudos for acting out their rage. And so it's extremely frustrating and confounding. Why would anybody do that? And why would anybody do that to another human being? Well, I suspect and I'm going to talk shrink again, I suspect they have made the other person an object in their mind, so it makes no difference what they do to them.
Exactly. Just like a car. Road, they're all basically an excuse to cycle. Remember, any addiction has to be cycled. And so oftentimes it starts with based anxiety, and you build your anxiety, and then you look for a trigger. And once you find a trigger, then you go into acting out stage, and you will act out in all kinds of ways. And then you come down to a place where it's maybe guilt and remorse, and oftentimes there is blaming afterwards, and then you start the cycle all over again.
Yes, exactly. You also write that standard anger management classes are often ineffective with rage-aholics. Tell us about that. That's my final question because our time is nearly up. So tell us about that.
I have treated so many people who came back from anger management classes. As you and I were talking about anger earlier on, anger is primarily old pain that is not being able to process properly. So when you put these people and you start conditioning them, in other words, if I tell you count backwards from 10 to 1, or go breathe, and you're basically trying to condition somebody who really does not understand themselves emotionally. The anger has to be processed in an emotional fashion. That means the person understands what's causing them to
Right.
feel the way they do. If they understand their hurt, and
Right.
if they understand what's causing the hurt, then they will be very effective to deal with their hurt.
But don't standard anger management classes deal with that?
Oh, some of them don't even understand what hurt really is.
Yeah.
I ask people, what's the definition of hurt or pain? They look at me like deer in headlights.
Uh-huh.
And I always say, all hurt or pain. My next book is about all feelings. I don't know if I told you, but
yeah.
My next book is coming out in about a couple of months. So Secrets to Emotional Wealth is primarily dealing with what feelings and how feelings really work.
Yeah, okay. I'm so sorry that I have to wrap this up because our time is almost up. But I'd like to do some clarifying and summarizing for my listeners here.
Okay.
One point is that road rage is a it's a symptom of a much deeper level of disturbance. And if you see a repetitive pattern happen in a relationship with someone, get out of the relationship. And if you're already, if it's already too late for you to get out of the relationship, if you're married, for instance, insist that your rage-aholic spouse get professional help, and don't think that standard anger management classes are going to be that effective. Get help with someone who can get underneath the rage and deal with what really is the problem, which is, as we've been saying this whole segment, fear and hurt.
Right.
So this situation is unlikely to get better on its own unless it truly was a one-time outburst of rage. In fact, it's highly likely to get worse on its own. If you're the spouse or partner of someone who rages, if you feel you can't get out or you don't want to get out, at the very least, do not tolerate the rages, because this is only an invitation for the situation to become worse. Dr. Casey, I wish we had a lot more time.
Well said. Well put together.
Yes. So thank you so much for talking with us, and I wish you the best in your next book.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Oh, good. Stay tuned, folks, for From the Files of Dr. Beth. I have an announcement to make to all of my listeners. Would you like to join a follow-up conversation, a live conversation with me? If you would, please email me at Dr. Beth Erickson at AOL and put Live with Dr. Beth in the subject line, and we'll get right back to you with the call-in information you need to get on the call. It'll be Thursday evenings at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 Central, and 5 Pacific. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. As I mentioned in my conversation with Dr. Casey when we were talking about working with cage fighters, I also once treated a cage fighter who is the consummate example of a rageaholic. This gentleman was a young man of 25 with a daughter who was 3 when his parents sent him in to see me. The girl's mother refused to marry him because of his rage. Although they did not realize this guy was a cage fighter, they were extremely concerned about his lack of interest in holding a job, supporting his daughter, losing his driver's license because of his raging, and his rages at and battles for control with his mother. As I probed for the roots of his behavior, he described being beaten up regularly by his older brother and his friends, starting when my client was 9, just after their parents' divorce. Of course, he felt powerless and unable to protect himself against his older brother, who was 4 years older and much bigger than he. He would frequently, when we began talking about cage fighting, would regularly describe how